This next session is really looking at the decentralized nature of the hub and the ability for us to focus into regional areas. So the title of the presentation is Green Dams. It's Julian Hill from the Gippsland node, Food and Fibre Gippsland. I hope you can hear us, Julian.
Yeah, I can.
Awesome.
Hopefully everybody can hear me from my end.
If you'd like to, up to you, if you'd like to turn your camera on, we've got a little box of you on the screen.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Probably not presentable. So, look, apologies, but I got a, let's say a slight scratch in the throat and it looks like a positive COVID, so I'd rather not spread that around with everybody. Sustainable Green Dams. Now, this program here is a funded project by both the Drought Hub and also Food and Fibre Gippsland in conjunction with the South Gippsland Land Care Network. One of the issues that we face with farm dams is, and I'll show some photographs in a few minutes, is that they're really recognised in the landscape as places where water is stored and water is consumed by livestock. Now, there's been some good surveys published in the Australian National Inventory for climate statistics, about 1.6 million farm dams, 430,000 of those approximately in Victoria, and the average, if you drew them as a square, the average surface area is 625 square meters, or 25 meters by 25 meters. In Victoria, the majority of those dams hold around about a megalitre of water or less. If you go to South Australia, similar types of dams of similar surface dimensions may hold between 1 and 3 megs. So the design of dams is very different from state to state. And effectively, most producers look at them and go, yep, they're a spot where we can store water in the landscape. So let's go to the next slide, please. So what we did down at Cape Lip Trap, which is in West Gippsland, so this is down in the southwest corner of Gippsland. This is the land, so to speak, of us people who farm in Gippsland, the land of milk and honey. This is consistent high rainfall environments. They sometimes get 1,500 to 1,700 millimeters of rain. If you go to 50k, 60k east of this site, you're in a very dry area where we farm, around about 450 millimeters of rain in the rain shadow. So at Cape Lip Trap, there's 4 dams which have been identified on this map: a ramp dam, a control dam, a spring dam, and a causeway dam. And we designed the site to be an extension site around those 4 different types of dams to have a look at this concept of whether dams can be not only a biodiversity hotspot in the landscape, but also whether when we change the orientation and design of the dam, whether we actually get an improvement in water quality, whether we get an increase in the numbers of species on farm, whether we actually get a better drinking water quality. So we set this up, we did water testing, we have camera monitoring, we have frog ID, and there's also some biodiversity around fish release, which is a much longer term part of the study. This site is also linked into a much larger project around farm dams, which is managed through Southern Farming Systems and Federation University. And the site has automated instrumentation on it. Next slide, please. So most people in the audience who farm, 2016 photograph at the top, that's a very typical farm dam you see in pasture. Yep, it sits there, puddle of water, bank around it, cattle wander in and out of that dam, and that is the very typical design. So what the owners did at the site about 8 years ago was they fenced that dam off and they started to do some revegetation around it. They also designed a reticulation process which could draw water out of the dam through a solar pump and redistribute that through water troughs across the landscape. Water quality, really nice. There's shade and shelter in relation to the vegetation spot within the paddock there, so animals can actually get behind vegetation quite easily. And that paddock and those areas of the farm would support over 100 lactating cows throughout summer. So it's a very typical system. But as you can see in 2023, the same dam from 2016 is very, very different in its vegetation characteristics and orientation. Next one, please, George. There's the design, which is called a restricted access ramp dam. And what we did was we actually got one of these constructed. What you do is you fence the dam off, and then you actually produce one area of the dam where the animals can walk down a ramp into the watering point of the dam, so the animals can drink from that point only. This removes the reticulation and a pump, so access is restricted. Generally, the livestock don't go into the dam and stand in the dam around the edges of the dam, because the point of the ramp is to try and contain those animals to that drinking point. What it does is that it actually alters the way the dam structure is. When you build these, you have to be really careful that you don't cause erosion damage or outflow or damage to the dam wall. You have to remember about the reliability of surface water and water table within the dam. So in other words, the dam ramp has to be designed in such a way that when that dam is actually becoming quite empty, the animals can still access water. We tend not to put these into calving paddocks. And again, this site here was only just installed about a year ago, and we've already got some reasonably nice quality improvements in water quality and drinking water, and animals seem to take to this access design fairly easily. Around the side of that dam, we will also have a vegetation and revegetation process going on. Next one, please. There is an unrestricted control access dam a bit further down. Put a photograph in this down in the catchment, purely on the basis that if anybody's driven past a farm dam at the present moment, you will see it covered in a zolla. It's everywhere, and that's a consequence of the recharge process that we got at the present moment certainly in Gippsland, and a lot of nutrients going into those dams. Next one, please. And then finally, there's what's called a causeway dam. This effectively is at the bottom of a catchment line. So this is the type of dam that you may well see. It's almost a natural water body. It's very steep-sided. It's deep. It has high water quality. However, within this dam structure, there was low dissolved oxygen because of the amount of soil carbon which runs down into the bottom of that catchment, and we ended up with almost an anoxic deep water situation as you would find in billabongs. So that kind of gives you an idea of what we have on the site. Next one, please, George. Were we successful? Well, we ran a couple of field days. Each field day had around about 75 to 80 producers who attended. We successful in the design of trying to improve our dams. Do we actually reduce erosion? Yes, we do, by different designing of the dam. Do we get better water quality? Yes, we got better water quality and better drinking water quality. Do we increase biodiversity? Yes, we do. Do we have a safer calving environment? In other words, open dams without fences sometimes pose some really significant issues with drowning. Yep, we can achieve that. Have we, with these design of dams, reduced evaporation and water loss out the surface of the dam too early? But the Southern Farming Systems Federation University continuous monitoring data will provide us with some really good quality information on that. The shade and shelter aspect, again, we still too early to say. That one's quite interesting because we will also be measuring water temperature as well as the shade and shelter. And in the next phase of this project, we've also put some microclimate weather stations in various strategic positions around the dams to actually get some shade and shelter data, which is away from the water body. Do these dams reduce the carbon footprint? Again, too early. There is good evidence from Deakin University's work funded through AgriFutures that there is an overestimation of the emissions of both methane and nitrous oxide out of farm dams. There was a big study done in the Riverina. There may well, that data, once it's published, may well inform a much better position in the Australian National Inventory. And others, easier stock management, better grazing distribution. Again, that is a farm management type discussion to have. The producers were absolutely fascinated by this type of project. We did some CASA scoring with the producer groups each time they came in. Their knowledge of these type of dams initially before the presentation and before actually being shown was around about 4 out of 10. Afterwards, they were getting to 7 out of 10. The adoption principles, when we asked them before the presentations, was, well, maybe 1 or 2 or 3. There's a lot of stigma around planting vegetation on dams. After the presentation, with some of the economic benefits explained, they were up to 7 or 8 potentially on adoption. So we look at this project as a second phase program into it rolling forward into the Drought Hub to the next phase. Next one, George. So in the end, there's a bit of a synopsis here. Ramp dams, they're expensive to build. However, you do end up with some really interesting, better quality aspects around, are there any risks here? Are there any failures in the decision support processes to do this? Can we monitor water volumes easier, et cetera, et cetera? Troughs and reticulated water out of green dams is really can get quite complex. You need to think very carefully about the engineering solutions. It doesn't mean you don't do this. You just need to really think through what you're doing here. Next one, please. So there's a lot of further information, and we've just received the final report case study. So after this, we will distribute it out, the case study report. It's an outstanding piece of work by the Landcare Network and the local producer groups down in this part of Gippsland. And we have also attached a Vimeo Farm Dam Field Day video, which is quite an interesting piece of collateral to show the impact of this. Okay, thanks for that.
Thanks, Julian.